Welcome to the Scandinavian Mind podcast, our weekly show about how technology is changing the creative industries. Today on the program, navigating new regulations for textile recycling. This is the second episode in our conversation series that we published throughout 2024 in collaboration with textile innovations company OnceMore. We are speaking with Maria Persdotter, Industrial Policy Specialist at Södra, and Åsa Degerman, Manager at OnceMore. In this episode, we'll talk about the upcoming EU regulations for the textile industry, what brands can do to prepare, how OnceMore is helping their customers navigate this upcoming transformation, and the need for collaboration throughout the value chain. My name is Konrad Olsson, Editor-in-Chief and founder of Scandinavian Mind. Alright guys, this is the second episode in our series of conversations that we published this year in collaboration with OnceMore. We are super happy about this collaboration as the topics that we talk about in Scandinavian Mind is very aligned with the agenda of OnceMore. In the last episode, we heard from Bestseller and how they are using recycled textile innovations in their products. And in upcoming episodes, we'll talk about the business of sourcing textiles for recycling. Before we get into today's conversation, I asked Tina Lemke, Marketing Manager, to describe OnceMore for us.
OnceMore is a high-quality dissolving pulp to start with. Today, it contains 20% recycled textile and 80% wood from Södra's sustainable managed forest here in Sweden. We are the first part in the value chain, the textile value chain. We produce the raw material that then becomes garments. What is also unique with OnceMore is that we can handle blended textile, polycotton blend, and we separate the cotton, add it into our process, and gives the cotton a new life, even though it's blended. Our product is already blended and ready to be used. So that's OnceMore.
So what is Södra's role in this?
Södra is the company behind the innovation OnceMore, and our product is 80% wood, and the wood comes from Södra's forest owners. Södra is owned by over 50,000 members, families in Sweden that owns their own wood, and that's where we get our raw material, the 80% of it. So Södra is the company behind it.
Alright, that was Tina Lemke, Marketing Manager at OnceMore. Here now, my conversation with Lisa Persdotter and Åsa Degerman. Enjoy. Alright, we are here with Åsa Degerman, Manager at OnceMore, and remotely from a studio at the OnceMore headquarters in Växjö, Maria Persdotter, Industrial Policy Specialist at OnceMore at Södra. Thank you so much for being here, guys. I'm so excited about this conversation. We're going to talk about big topic in a short amount of time. We're going to fill this with a lot of insights, hopefully, and perhaps also help our audience with navigating these new regulations that are coming into the textile industry and for textile recycling. I'm going to start off with having you guys introduce yourself. Åsa, starting with you.
Thank you. So nice to be here today. My role is as manager at OnceMore, and I work with both producing and also developing for the future. So my role is really about scaling, but also to mitigate all the risks and also the opportunities that is out there. So in a very short sentence, that's my role.
Risks and opportunities. I think we'll get back to both in this conversation. Over to you, Maria, Industrial Policy Specialist. What does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? I ask myself sometimes when I wake up in the morning, but I try to follow and understand politics. And for me, politics is the process of making decisions. And when you try to follow, understand, and give constructive feedback on politics, it's on this decision you give feedback on. So I try to understand the politics. I try to understand the policies that are the outcomes from these political decisions. And we want, my main task is to look after that these policies supports our members or forest owners or businesses or existing businesses, but also our new businesses. So that's what I do. I more or less wake up every morning, like what's going on in the world, but also in the politics, what affect us, what affect our businesses. But also I think one important part, being an industrial policy specialist, is considering how can we be a part of shaping the future. Because sometimes it feels like when we talk about legislations and rules and regulation, it feels like a burden, but we also need to take an active part in that process of how can we be a part shaping this. So that's what I'm working with.
That's a great way to start. And how can we be a part of shaping this? This is really what these conversations are about. And I think it's safe to say that a lot of people who listen to this have an idea that there are a bunch of regulations and legislations coming into the textile industry. When I speak to the fashion industry specifically, there's still a lot of worry, a lot of confusion, a lot of what does this actually mean for me? And we're not going to be able to answer all of these questions today, but I think we're going to try to at least get a sense of the whole thing. And Maria, maybe you can start by giving some context. Why is this happening in the EU to begin with?
Okay, so I will try to start, and I always start kind of in a broad context. We have the Agenda 2030 with the Sustainable Development Goals. We have the Paris Agreement. It is on a global level, but we also have this European Green Deal. This is the EU's biggest legislative package ever, and it is a broad reform agenda that links both biodiversity, increased resource efficiency, but also circular economy with this climate transition. So that is like the context of it. But the aim, we talk about this legislative package, but sometimes we forget the aim of it. And the aim is to develop Europe into a competitive and resource efficient economy. And one way to do that is to look into circular economy, textiles, etc., and many more different areas, of course. We are dealing with transport, energy, forests, and a lot of different areas in the Green Deal. But for today, and our focus today is on the textile reform agenda, we can say. And then you have to try to understand the circular economy strategy that EU put forward. And they said that this is the new agenda in Europe for sustainable growth. And they also said that we will have two specific focus areas, where one is textile and the other one is waste. And Åsa, that's why the circular economy and textile strategy is so important for OnceMore, since, I mean, the raw material that we use to produce our textile pulp comes from waste and from raw material from the forests. So that is like the broad scope of why legislation hits, or what can you say, affect textile industry so much at the moment. Right.
Maybe we can stick on that for a little moment before we get into the details. And Åsa, maybe you can expand a little bit on what Maria just said. Like, why is this important for OnceMore? Obviously, it hits you in a few different ways, but maybe you can talk about it from kind of a business perspective.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to the background, why did we create and develop OnceMore? It's really about being this resource efficiency, and that goes back to the Circular Economy Action Plan. And it's how to see both in terms of how can we produce fibers and pulp with waste. And that's why we have OnceMore. It's a brilliant innovation, but it's also to help the fashion and the textile industry to be more conscious when it comes to using recycled content. So we are one of the enablers to actually helping them to start to use recycled fibers, which will be some kind of recommendation or demanded in legislation in the future. We don't know that yet, if it will be a recommendation or if it will be a law. And that, I think, is one of the uncertainties that we have in one of the coming ESPR, Eco Design Sustainable Product Regulation. So that's for us. Coming back, what can we, where do we fit in this textile and fashion industry? Definitely when it comes to the recycled content, but also how can we produce more from less, and also how can we reduce the impact on the textile and fashion industry, where we are the first step with producing pulp, and then it will become fiber, and then it will be spinning, etc. But we make out the most out of it. So reducing impact by also recycling and take on textile waste. But in the end, it's the fiber demand that needs to be there, and that's where the fashion industry is important, and that's our customer.
Yeah, we're going to get back to the customer and the fiber demand, but let's try to break this down a little bit. What are these? I know there are many different types of legislations happening, but maybe we can break it down a little bit. And also to your point, Åsa, I think a lot of this is about understanding the whole value chain, understanding that this is really a sequence of kind of events happening for something to end up as a garment in a consumer's hand. And understanding that value chain is, the work that we do with Scandinavian Mind, but also many in the fashion industry are kind of waking up to actually understanding how this all works. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Maria, maybe we can break down to what are some of the key aspects of this package that is coming from the EU.
Yes, and maybe we can talk about this thinking of the textile value chain, because that is very good to do this policy mapping in a value chain perspective, because also then you see that there are some gaps in the policy making process. It's very difficult when you it has been a very, not difficult, maybe that's maybe a wrong word, but it has been very but difficult to understand how all these legislations will be working together in a value chain. So, we have powerful legislation on the raw material. We have powerful legislation on the production of textiles. We have powerful regulations on the products, but also for the consumer, for the empowerment of the consumer.
Right.
So looking into these legislations, I think it's good to have a value chain perspective. And if we start with the raw material, we have legislation, of course, for us, OnceMore, that has raw material from the forest. We have a very, very demanding and very worrying regulations regarding to our raw material from the forest. But we also have a kind of progressive regulation when it comes to how we are going to handle waste in Europe in the future, the waste regulation. And then if you look on production, there the textile strategy is pretty clear here, that manufacturers must take responsibility for textiles in the value chain. And then we have this ESPR, the Eco Design for Sustainable Product Regulation that Åsa mentioned. That is it hits all the products on the inner market in EU in the future. So, and we start with textiles. We also started with batteries, but textile, for this podcast, textile is important.
And that's where the term digital product passport comes in as well,
exactly,
which is thrown around frequently these days.
Yeah, so this eco-design regulation, it's different things. It's about public procurement, that we want public procurement to be like front runners to buy these more sustainable products. We have digital product passport as a part of increased transparency and the traceability in the value chain. And we also had these product requirements, and also you touch upon that we want to set requirements both on a product group where many different types of textiles are included. We call these requirements for horizontal requirements. And then we have specific product requirements per type of product, like t-shirt or shirt that I'm wearing, or pants or shoes. And in these specific requirements, we will have what Åsa said, a demand for a regulation for recycled content, and etc. And in order to understand how these requirements, for instance, for recycled contents should best be developed, you need also to understand the value chain, all the different perspectives in the value chain. Maybe also you want to collaborate on that. I know we know that when you say recycled content, what do you mean? Could the recycled content in a future textile be anything? Could it be 20% of just some waste? Or should that 20% be some specific raw material, some specific material? Should it be circular material? Should it be renewable material? That is kind of topic that is being discussed at the moment, and the rules for this recycled content will be set maybe in the late of this year or in 2025. And this kind of requirement is difficult for each actor in the value chain, I think, to get the best requirements for recycled content. We need to find this best recycled content requirement together.
Right. Also, maybe we can add some context here. Maybe you can fill in on what Maria just said.
Yeah, this is where we are I would like to say that we are in the infancy,
Right.
in the beginning of something that will be further developed. And I think this is where we need to learn and teach from each other. That's why we see this collaboration and partnership in the ecosystem so important. I mean, we learn from our customers, which are the brands. We learn from them how they produce and what kind of processes and demands they have. But they also listen to us and see what is feasible, what can we do, and what is not feasible in the long term or in the short term. So I think this is a learning exercise that we need to do now, because it has been very much separate. It's a global ecosystem, and we don't talk to the Chinese part or the Bangladesh part, but now we need to start to talk to them, and they need to understand also our demands. So I would say, I mean, for the future, and also I think what the legislation is concerned, and their worry is that they will set too ambitious targets that never will be reached, and then everyone will be demotivated, and we will not come anywhere. So I think it's really important, and I think that's how EU also is thinking, to take it step by step. And talking about recycled content, I mean, you just need to map the different actors, and that it's a handful actors that can today deliver fibers with recycled content.
Right.
So how can we accommodate 100 million ton textile per year with a handful of actors? That's why I think we need to do this stepwise, and the legislation need to consider that. I think we also need to think you need to transform a whole company. I think that's also when we're talking about our customers, it's a whole company that need to be transformed. It's not one shot to do one piece with recycled content. It's about changing, and I think this will take time, and we need to hold our hands, hold each other hands.
No, I see that a lot, and specifically in fashion brands where medium, maybe a little bit bigger ones. There are different roles in the organizations that needs to touch this issue. Really, it's not purely a sustainability issue. It's a procurement issue. It's a design issue. It's a financial issue. So actually implementing some of these new tools and also tackling all these legislations, it's something that it affects the whole company, which I think is sometimes an unusual thing for some of these brands. How do you feel that, and what can you do as OnceMore to help facilitate this? And maybe both of you can speak to this issue. What's your role here in educating the fashion brands?
Can I just say something?
Sure.
That's it's an answer to your question, but also connect with what Åsa said, because I think that when we say we need to get them to understand our demands, I get kind of annoyed by that, because I think that these things needs to be built on trust and relationships in the value chain, and that's how we go forward. That's how we get results in the end. I mean, just put out in the value chain a lot of measurements and demands. That doesn't feel that good, and that is not how you develop a new system or a new business model, I think. So you need to create relationships in the value chain, and that's, I think, I think we have we can be an important part of this, because we did this policy mapping. When we talk with our different stakeholders in the value chains, we can start to discuss these things with them and so on. So I think that is important, that we see each other as more or less equal in a value chain, and we build relationships. And by that, we can develop less polluting textiles in the future.
And that was actually what I wanted to conclude as well, is how we do it is by building relationship with the customers. Because it takes a little bit of time in order to get that understanding and get the right discussions ongoing. Yeah. So definitely, and by that I'm not saying that every step will take a long time, but I think we are also on a learning journey. But every year we make improvements, and it will become better for sure. But that takes time, and I think that's we always say, like, the paper industry, we've been recycling for more than 50 years, and we're still at a level of 65-70% of recycled paper every year. And look at that, took 50 years. So I think we can see that. Let's talk about 2040, 2050, and then
let's give ourselves some slack, perhaps.
No, but it also gives us some kind of perspective then. Then we can do some tests. Okay, for example, digital product passport. How will that work in a value chain when you have stakeholders, global stakeholders? How would that work, a digital product passport? Then we can test it in the value chain, and we can develop it from that. So I think we need to be more, we need to have more, how do you say this in English? Courage, mood, to actually test some of this legislation before we go into making all these demands.
That's a really interesting point, I think, and a part of this, also you talk about the learning journey, and we talk about this kind of uncertain roadmap that this whole legislation thing is from the EU. We don't know exactly where it will hit, where it will land, what the specifications will be. Maria, maybe you can talk about how you tackle this in your day-to-day job. You touched upon it earlier in the conversation, but how do one think about this? These upcoming regulations, and because it's not every company that has the luxury of having a industrial policy specialist kind of on call. How would you advise fashion brands to think about how to just keep up to date about this? Yeah, first, just connect with others in the value chain, connect with us. I mean, we work a lot with these type of questions, but also I can just explain how we did it. As an example, we developed something that we call a position paper. We did this policy mapping. We put all down. I know that not everyone can do this, but we did this. We had the resources to do this, so we can be kind of helpful in the value chain about this. We put down a position paper when we give the reader description of our solutions that we think is important for the textile industry transformation, but also we describe the challenges we face. But we also look into what type of policy environment do we need. And I don't say that this is the best or the only position you can have, but this is a start. And then together with different actors in the value chains, we can develop this. Okay, because we see this from one perspective, but we need to look at these different things from many different perspectives. I mean, we have not we, but Angeline, who was part of this podcast earlier,
she has a terrific, I think, flow that shows the textile value chain, what we are like facing in our daily work when it comes to just handling the textile value chain. And on top of that, we also have this legislation. So I don't know if that's an answer to your question, but that is how we handle it. Like, just dig into it, but be humble about it, because we don't have any answers for all the things, and we don't fully understand how everything will affect this value chain. But you need to start to think about it, and you need to start to work with these challenges. But you also need to take an active part in legislative processes. That's like something that I really want more actors in the value chain to do, actually. Take part in these processes. I mean, we can be a part. Sometimes we talk about this is EU legislation, someone over there, but we are a part of this. So we need also to take an active part in shaping the legislation.
Taking active part. I love that. Åsa, how would you advise, small to medium-sized fashion brand looking at some of these, sometimes people call it a tsunami of regulations coming in. Like, it's overwhelming sometimes, but you have to do something. You have to take, a few next steps. How do you talk to your clients about this?
We can educate and learn a little bit, but I think when you come to the small and medium size, when you have very scarce resources and you need to, really think about, where you spend your time and money, being part of some kind of larger organization when it comes to industry association is always good. We have, for instance, in Sweden, we have Teko. And we have Svensk Handel, but that is similar. At least in Europe, they will have national bodies and organization. I think that is super important. And even, that's to stay informed and be updated via someone else. I think that's really, really good and really important. And then I know already that the larger brands, they do have a voice in Europe. They have a voice in this policy making as well, of course. And I think that's also where we use, because we are fairly small, once more. That's also where we use the industry associations to get a voice and get educated. But I think it's just to start somewhere, and don't be afraid to ask.
For sure.
No.
So,
and exactly, and the business association you were talking about, Åsa, I think one thing that I think we have done a bit differently is that we are not nowadays not only part of our traditional business association like the forest industries, but we are also part of the recycling industries and the textile industry, and that has broadened our understanding for these legislations and so on. So I urge you to take part in this business association, but also not only to the one that is the traditional ones for your business.
Awesome. Maybe we can, because we have to round it up soon, unfortunately. We can talk about this for a very long time, I feel like. Maybe some takeaways, some learnings from working with your clients, and maybe because you have done very interesting special projects with Swedish fashion brands. What do they do right, the ones that really are on the forefront? I mean, they're on the forefront using your product, of course, but they're also on the forefront of learning what's kind of happening around the corner.
They have an ambition. They are willing to test without knowing the results. And I think that is very, very good. And they are also transparent about it. We don't know if it will work or not, but we need to test, and we can only learn from it. I think that's takeaways that I take from the collaboration we have done with a couple of brands. And we need to do the piloting, we need to do the testing, and then we see how we can improve and take the next step.
So just start. Maria, any final advice or suggestions of how to create your legislation roadmap?
Have fun while doing that, because it sounds like really boring, but it is really actually interesting and it's fun. You learn a lot. And I think to have fun, it also creates motivation. And if we can be motivated about this, we can, how do you say this in English? You can help me, smitta. We can
infect our people around us. Or,
to be motivated in this journey towards a more resource efficient textile industry. So I think that is more soft parts of the things. Of course, read the legislation and try to understand, but also have fun while reading the legislation.
I love that. That's a great way to end this conversation. Have fun while reading the legislation. Maria Persdotter and Åsa Degerman, thank you so much for sharing your insights today.